Welcome, I'm Tom from Kulaba Woodworking, and today we are gonna look at a table build, especially a live age river table. So the first step of every live age table is to clean up the slab. So we are removing here all the bark, all the softwood, and everything that could compromise the bond of the epoxy. We want the epoxy to bond to the hardwood and to have a solid bond. Next, I did flatten the slab before the pour, which I never do to make sure the thickness is there. But this one was so warped, we would have lost so much epoxy, so I've flattened it beforehand. And now you can see a little bit of the grain already, a bit of a preview how the table will be looking, which made it easier to design the table as well. Now it's time to build our reusable epoxy foam. I plan to build this foam out of white melamine. I'm cutting here the edges, so I have two white melamine sheets with 120 x 60. One I use for the sides and the other one I use for the bottom. Now I'm gonna cover the bottom with my mold release, red tuck tape. I'll make sure there's no gaps and I cover every single surface bit. This will prevent the epoxy to stick to the mold. Then we screw on the sides to the bottom, and after this project I got an impact drill because this drill driver was a pain. Now we're gonna seal the foam with silicone. I'm using silicone because it's a bit more durable than cork. Cork could work as well, but I want to reuse this mold and only open one side, so this is why I'm using silicone. It's very secure and very safe, and it makes it pretty leak proof. I'm making sure everything is sealed, and I'm also waiting about 24 hours before I pour my epoxy. Here you can see me measuring the edge pieces. I tried to cut them first with my circular saw, but that didn't work at all. So I used my Makita track saw, which is a beast, and obviously this one had no problem to cut through the slab. I'm usually making 2 passes with a thickness like that, so it's just a little safer and there's less tear out. I did the same thing on the other side. I measured it and my track saw went through it like butter. Now I'm calculating the epoxy. How much volume do I need? What I'm doing is I'm making measurements every 10 centimeters roughly. I'm measuring the height and then I take the average of the length and the width, and then I calculate the epoxy. For more details, I will have a new video up on that as well. We are using the Health of Mind Art Deep Pure Resin, which is one of the best resins I've ever worked with. It cures rock art, it just creates no bubbles, and it's overall a great product. I am not sponsored by them, but I can highly recommend it. So, mixing the epoxy is obviously a very crucial step. I cannot overstress how important this is. Epoxy has to be mixed correctly, otherwise it will not cure. You will have soft spots in your final product. So go to the sides, scrape the bottoms, and really mix it well until there's no streaks left. So the epoxy should be kind of clear. This pigment paste of Health of Mind Art is also a great product they're offering. I prefer to use pigment pastes over dyes because pigment pastes like this pitch black from Health of Mind Art does not stain the wood. So this means I do not need to seal the edges of my table, which could compromise the bond, and it also takes one more step out of the build, which obviously I prefer, because the less steps the better. I measure the color with a cup. I fill up about the thickness of the pour I will do, and then if the color is satisfactory, I'll start the pour. And that's what we are seeing here. You can see I've clamped down the slabs. It's very important to clamp them down, otherwise they will be floating, and in a second you will see why it is so important to clamp them down. Right about now I'm realizing that something is not right. I keep pouring and one of the sides is not filling up. I'm like, okay, I calculate the epoxy correctly. Did I make a mistake there? No worries, let's make some more and pour it in. Yay, more pouring. Anyway, that was not the issue, just spoiler alert. I'll keep filling it in and I keep noticing that the epoxy flows to one side. So I thought like, okay, my foam is not 100% straight. If your foam is not 100% straight, it will be flowing to one side, and it's obviously not good for your pour because your pour will be uneven. Again, I measured, it was everything correct. I did put the shim in already, and you can see on this side I tried to pour something in. It's like, okay, is it filling up? But it kept being the same issue, and I kept raising the epoxy foam, pouring more, but nothing helped. In the end, I decided, okay, I have to pour into the crack, which was a big issue as well, but that will come later in the video. But here you can see me suddenly looking at the edge and realizing the edge is floating. So this big crack allowed that second part of that slab to float up a little bit, and this is why it is so important to clamp down your slab. I didn't even realize, but the force was so great that it floated and it kept seeping underneath. Now I'll fix it with a weight on top of it. The issue what I'm having later on is that I already messed with the level, and you will see that later there is gonna be a big issue. Also, the crack leaked completely. So it leaked completely into my live edge, and all this epoxy obviously was wasted. Anyway, nothing to do about it right now. Next step is to demold, and we hope obviously the slab comes out easily of the mold, which it actually does. The epoxy is actually not held down by the tape here, but a little bit by the cork. And here you can see the mess all of this caused already. The first thing I had to do is to obviously fix up the live edge, because I wanted to keep that one. What I did is I put a flush trim bit onto my router, and then I just rolled it along and made it snow. This fixed that issue, so that's fantastic. This is how you can fix a live edge if your epoxy leaks. Now I'm trying to fix the issue with the crack. We have to fill the crack. The crack has to be filled to the brim with epoxy. So we're sealing the underside here with our tuck tape, which is much easier than what I did here with the cork, and much safer than before. So I also put a little bit of a dam on the side so that the epoxy can't float over the sides. and we don't lose any epoxy. The next step is to mix the epoxy. We are using again the 2:1 deep pure resin because it was quite a big crack, very deep, so if it's a certain depth you can't use a tabletop epoxy anymore. With the different epoxy types, there are certain types that can go certain depths or have certain applications. There will be a video on the channel as well that will describe what epoxy to use when. I'm using my speed square and my Makita track saw to cut the table to final size and also cut the perfect 90 degrees. I'm loving my Makita track saw. It's extremely accurate and very powerful. I haven't had an issue with it at all. I've cut through relatively thick stock, even though sometimes I have to do 2 passes, but it is an extremely great product. Now we are flattening the process, and if I can outsource one thing, I would do this. It's kind of satisfying to do, but it makes a mess. You can see here, like the wood, the epoxy chips, everything is flying everywhere. And I'm almost spending as much time cleaning up than doing the flattening. Now here we have that issue I mentioned beforehand, because I messed with the level of the epoxy foam. You can see there was quite a bit of a dip in the epoxy, and I didn't want to mill down all the way to preserve the thickness of the table. So what I decided to do is I scuffed up this area here, and I wanted to fill it up with tabletop epoxy, which I'm doing. So I'm starting to scuff everything up to get a good bond between the 2 epoxies. I'll just create a little dam with this tuck tape again so that it doesn't flow over, and also on the side. Then, to be extra secure, I put it back into the foam so there are no leaks whatsoever. Then we mix the tabletop epoxy. A tabletop epoxy is for very shallow pours, a 1:1 mix from Health of Mind Art again. You can see I'm popping the bubbles here, and I'm using the same color pigment, the pitch black from Health of Mind Art. It is easy to color match black, pitch black. Everything else will be super difficult, and you would see for sure. So this is why I went with the route to actually fill up this gap with epoxy instead of flattening down the table to a thinner tabletop. Yay, another epoxy pour. Now we're trying to get that as evenly as possible. I'm trying to fill in some little cracks as well, and what you can see here, it's actually quite easy to level that out. This is a quite thin that tabletop epoxy, so it levels quite easily. 24 hours later, everything has been cured. We have demolded and also got rid of the tape. We now started sanding everything down so that everything is nice and flat again with this very nice Bosch sander that we recently got. There will be also a full review on that on our channel in the future. But the one thing I can say, this one is a beast, and I have a little bit of a preview later on in this video on what this is about with this set. We do see the table coming together slowly. You can see the shape, you can see all the epoxy cracks filled in, which is awesome. And it's actually turning out quite well already. And there it is, our final epoxy pour of this build. There was a quite a substantial crack on the other side of the table, and I filled it up with tabletop epoxy. It didn't need deep pour because it wasn't that deep, but there it is, the final epoxy pour. And now back to sanding, and here is the little review that I was promising. There's a turbo mode on this sander, and then it just becomes a beast, and you can see the scratch pattern on the epoxy is very aggressive, so you can sand very aggressively like a belt sander, but with the control of the orbital sander. And then when you turn it off, you can actually see how fine and good the scratch pattern goes back. Both of them were done with 80 grit, so you can see the scratch pattern was completely different. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see this video and you want to get a notification when it's up. I would also appreciate if you have learned anything out of this video. Leave a like and a comment down below. Here we're filling up the little cracks with our stubborn medium thick black CA glue, which is the fancy term of super glue. It sands very nicely and it cures very quickly as well. Next step is chamfering our edges and corners. I'm using a little router here, handheld router with a chamfer bit, and what you can see here, it's pretty easy to use. You just run over it. This will leave a couple of marks on your sides which have to be sanded out again. This is why I'm usually sanding to like 120 grit and then do the chamfer, and then sand all the way up to 180. Let me know in the comments if you like this spider leg design. The client loved it, I love it, but I'm really curious to know what you guys think. We fitted these spider legs with threaded inserts and they really went easily in to the wood, but I had real issues to get them into the epoxy. So the trick is there is to go one size up, put a little bit of tabletop epoxy around the fitting and then screw them in, and then they fit really rock hard and they go in much easier, so you don't need to struggle like I do, and it also doesn't create any tear out. To our finishing process, first we are cleaning our tabletop with mineral turpentine that can be bought in any Bunnings. And for our finish, we are using Brooklyn Monocoat 2C, which is a hard wax oil that is usually used for flooring. It is an extremely durable finish and leaves always a perfect result. It is extremely easy to use. You wipe it on like you spread it on, like you can see here. I just dump a little bit on it and then spread it around with one of my scrapers here, and after that you just wipe it off. You leave it on for a couple of minutes so it soaks into the grain, and then you just wipe it off as much as you can. The Rubio guys say you can't wipe too much off, but you can leave too much on. I'm super happy how this table turned out. Here you can see the table in the final space where it actually lives right now. I really like how that grain pops and how the black epoxy complements this camper. Thank you again so much for watching.